This must be Police the Media Day. Washington Post, who is taken to just kind of ignoring one Bernie Sanders. As you know, Washington Post is essentially owned by one Jeff Bezos, the same person that Bernie Sanders hits relentlessly. Well, that same Washington Post, for the most part, has taken to ignoring that same Bernie Sanders. It breaks its silence on Bernie Sanders. And it breaks the silence on Bernie Sanders to run this ludicrous headline. It's hard to see, but labor fight roils Bernie Sanders campaign as workers demand the $15 per hour that the candidate has proposed to employees nationwide. Now, most people only read the headline. And if you read that headline, you would walk away from this thinking that one Mr. Bernie Sanders, who's pushing for $15 an hour minimum wage, doesn't want to pay his employees $15 an hour. Hypocrisy! That's what you would come away with that. I'm going to give you the real story on this. That headline is entirely misleading and utterly ludicrous. Welcome to the Soapbox. My name is Jamarl Thomas. This is the Progressive Soapbox, Soapbox After Dark, that is. Guys, if you enjoy this content, you find yourself coming to this particular channel often, please consider liking this video, sharing this video, only if you do, in fact, like this video. And you can also support this video through PayPal or Patreon. YouTube is an untrustworthy actor at this point, so even $1 helps. I saw this article a few days ago, and, you know, it's sad that this is where we are, because we have a corporate media. That corporate media has a job of maximizing its profit, which means it needs to find narratives that would catch the eye of the reader. And it needs to find these narratives in a cacophony of noise. And here you go. One Bernie Sanders. Oh, that Bernie Sanders is having a labor dispute with his union that's a part of his his campaign. So the story here is the dispute. So let's talk about that. It is true that Bernie Sanders' campaign is having a dispute with the labor union. But let's start there. There's a labor union. The labor union in Sanders' campaign is unprecedented. It has never been a case where there's been a labor union associated with a campaign. So the first point is that one, Mr. Bernie Sanders, I don't know if he pushed for the labor union to be a part of his campaign, if he was just okay with it, but there is a union that is working with the Sanders campaign. Second point, unions by definition are adversarial. It doesn't make it any less so that Bernie Sanders is the head of that campaign and that union is tied to his campaign. The job of a corporation is to maximize their profit, at least the way they see it. Maximize your profit. Get as much as you possibly can using whatever you have within the system to which you find yourself. The catch here is labor is expensive. And one of the costs that corporations have to bear and that they don't want to bear is labor, meaning they're going to pay as least or as little as they possibly can get away with paying for labor costs. Unions are organized labor, and those unions have a very specific interest in pushing for benefits and getting a share of the pie that that corporation is making and is trying to accrue to the top. This, by definition, creates an adversarial relationship. That adversarial relationship doesn't change just because it's the Sanders campaign and it's that union. I hope you understand what I mean. By definition, unions are adversarial. So the back and forth between the Sanders campaign and the union, of course, there's going to be some friction in the negotiations between those two things. That's the second point. Third point. This is not a dispute over these people getting paid $15 an hour. This is a dispute over hours, believe it or not. Sanders pays his interns. Sanders pays his field officers $42,000 a year. The people who are associated with this campaign are associated with this campaign on a salary. Sanders wanted these guys, or the Sanders campaign wanted them to work 6 days out of the week. But working in this way would have lowered the effective amount to which they were getting paid. Initially, they were going to be paid $17 an hour. By expanding the time frame, however, that they were going to work, it was going to cut the amount they were getting paid, if I'm not mistaken, to under $13 or under $15 an hour. The back and forth between the two is not necessarily a conflict. They're doing what they are supposed to do. the campaign is negotiating with the labor union to come to a consensus on what they can run with. There is no story here in this case. There is no dispute or conflict. They are negotiating. That is literally what they are supposed to be doing. I hope you understand what I mean. A labor union's job is to represent the interests of the employees. That doesn't change just because a person is Bernie Sanders. This labor union's job is doing that by saying, look, by expanding the hours, the effective amount that we're getting paid is lessening. That needs to change. The campaign is negotiating with the labor union in this case. This is a model of what is supposed to happen, that the Washington Post has contorted into a labor dispute as if Sanders doesn't want to pay the people who's working with him $15 an hour. That's sad, by the way. Fourth point. This disadvantages Sanders. He's doing this on principle. I hope you understand what I mean. Assume for the moment that you have a campaign. Part of the reason that Walmart, when Sanders went there to browbeat them to raise their wages to $15 an hour, that they came out and says, all of the industry needs to raise it to $15 an hour. They say that because the moment that they increase their wages to $15 an hour, the amount that the top 1% makes goes down. The profitability, meaning the amount that the company could say that this is how much we've earned, goes down to some degree because you're paying your employees, which you should do, especially if you're a multi-billion-dollar company. But on the second point, they're competitors. If their competitors in the competition is not paying their people a decent wage, then Walmart, from their standpoint, in their mind, loses profitability in relation to their competition who is not paying their people a decent wage. In their heads, they feel that they're at a disadvantage if they pay their people a decent wage because their competition is not. In Sanders' campaign, this is literally true because Sanders is running a campaign where profit and the amount of money that they make is key to success. Meaning his war chest, the amount of money that he can spend on ads, that he can spend on locations and events, etc., matters. It's a great deal. It's a reason why the Democratic Party is talking about donations. And it's a reason why his war chest is extremely important. The amount of money that he has on hand and that he can use to marshal to his aim is clearly to his benefit. He is making a choice to allow this union and to work with this union with this notion of paying them more than the other campaigns. And in doing so, however, meaning having less to use to the campaign itself. This is a choice that he's doing for ideological reasons. Now, if you're a right-winger, you can say that's stupid because he should be trying to win and he should be using all of the money that he can. There are ancillary benefits, meaning the people are going to be happier to work with you because those people are being paid better. You as a campaign can be an earnest actor in that case. So there are benefits that go beyond just the economic benefit and the political benefit of being able to use the money to your ends. It all depends on what you deem to be the highest good. I hope that makes sense. I want to go into specifics about what is taking place because the campaign itself responded to this. But everything I've just told you here was right. Ultimately, this is a dispute over the hours. The hours that the Sanders campaign wanted lower the effective rate that they were going to get in their salary. The back and forth, the negotiation, which is literally what is supposed to take place, is over increasing the amount they're getting paid so their effective rate is over the 15 an hour and back up to the 17 that it was before. Let me give you the Sanders team's response, and I'll end this video on that. This gentleman, Davis Tom, contacted them. On May 8th, Bernie's campaign and union came to an agreement, first and only campaign so far to ratify a union contract, that all field organizers will have an annual salary of $36,000 instead of hourly salary. This salary was based on 5 days a week, working 40 hours a week. On hourly based salary, this would have been $17 an hour. In addition to the pay scale, the CBA collective bargaining agreement also provides full health insurance without premium, mental health benefits, parental leave options, and gas card for one while on the job, and other options not traditionally available to low-level campaign staff. On May 17th, Bernie's campaign manager made a proposition to the union to change the 5-day agreement to 6-day agreement with a hike of $42,000 annually, which would make it $16.8 an hour. There is no info about whether the proposal was initiated by Fayez based on the issue raised by the union, or the union raised the issue of 60-hour work week then. But the union rejected the proposal as the raise would have elevated the field staff pay level responsible for paying more of their own healthcare costs. This is because Bernie's campaign pays all premiums for salaried employees making $36,000 or less per year. Those making more are covered with an annual rate of 85%. Meaning, they were going to pay these people $42,000 to work 6 days a week, as opposed to the 5 days a week. These were just propositions and negotiations. The reason why they rejected this is because they would have had to pay more of their healthcare costs, which would have essentially cut into the amount that they themselves would have been bringing home. It's a negotiation. This is the real story. But the union rejected this proposal as the raise would have elevated field staff to pay level responsible for paying more of their own healthcare costs. This is because Bernie's campaign pays all premiums for salaried employees making $36,000 or less a year. Those making more are covered at a rate of 85%. On July 11th, only 8 days before this Washington Post report appeared, some field officers raised concerns in staff Slack channel that even though the initial agreement was 40 hours per week, they are now working about 60 hours per week, and that 60 hours estimated their annual rate of $36,000 will only be $13 an hour. Fayez replied that instead of direct talks, talk through the union, which is the standard procedure. The union is preparing a new proposal. Meaning that when they got it in real world terms, they were like, look, I know you guys say we're supposed to be working 5 days a week, but we're really working like 60 hours a week. We're pushing ass for Bernie Sanders. We're trying to get him elected. But that really only equals out to like $13 an hour now. They said this in Slack. Fayez said, look, go through your union because your union is the direct channel for negotiation, which is what is taking place. They're negotiating. And what they're finding is they're working out the kinks. This is the first campaign to ever have a union. And that union is negotiating for better benefits for the employees. Better benefits, mind you, than any of the other campaigns. Washington Post could have wrote a story about that. It could have wrote a story how this is a model of how a union works with the people who they're working with. They could have wrote a story about how this is the first campaign with the union. There are all sorts of ways that you could have wrote the story in an earnest actor way. They're negotiating on pay and hours. And it's more so an issue of hours. Because the pay part is a salaried pay that these guys are giving them. They have no issue with the pay. Their issue is, look, we're finding in real practice we're working more hours than this, which lowers our effective pay. We need more. We need more pay. It's what a union is supposed to do. It's what a union is supposed to do. Washington Post. Washington Post. Begging for a story. Haim Ali was watching a previous California clip about YouTube algorithm. Have you looked into float a plane? I wish I caught it today. Keep up the good work. Oh, thanks, man. Have you looked into float plane? I have not looked into float plane. But I'm not going to keep this. But I am trying to police fake news. And this was a story that came out that people were paying attention to and they were looking at it. And I wanted to correct the record on the reality of Washington Post's piece. It's a union. First campaign to have one. That union is pushing for higher hours or higher pay for the hours that they're working. The Sanders campaign is paying historic rates and covering healthcare and everything else. This is unprecedented. But that's not what Washington Post broke their silence on Bernie Sanders to talk about. This. Drama. Whole cloth. Drama. Elephants on Coke. Just for your effort in fighting fake news. Oh, thank you, Elephants on Coke. I appreciate it. I appreciate it. All right, guys. I will end this here. If you guys get a mic, there's nothing wrong with that mic. Yes, that mic looks like a little penis. Well, I don't care how the mic looks. I care what the mic sounds like. And I've heard no other complaints about this mic, so kick rocks. Javid Bustos. People like Tim Pool ran with this story in order to smear Sanders' campaign. Thank you for breaking it down. It's nonsense. They were just looking for something. I mean, look, I don't know who Tim Pool is, but if Tim Pool running with a fake news story, that gives you a little bit of heads up about who he is. This story is nonsense. It's a labor dispute. If you want to talk about the story, you talk about the story because Sanders has a labor union, and that labor union is pushing back against the campaign. And again, he's ratifying the union with the campaign against his own personal interests. I hope you understand that. If the other campaigns doesn't have a union, if the other campaigns is not paying these wages, then the other campaigns has more money to apply towards the aim of getting elected. Sanders is doing this for ideological reasons. The notion that they're hitting him on this is utter lunacy and nonsense. So yeah, this is a correct the record piece. Just saying. Thanks all. Like and share. Thanks everyone.